Welcome to our webinar on how you can leverage data to justify a website redesign. And when I talk about data, we're looking at your website data and also the digital campaigns you can be using to drive traffic to your website. With me today, I have digital strategy team lead, Christina Baker, and I have digital marketing team lead, Lindsay Mora. So the best place to start is at the beginning. How do you gather the data that you need in order to start presenting the case for this new website? So my question first is for Christina. What measurement tools do you use the most when you're looking at gathering website data?
Yeah, it's a great question. Some of the tools that we really like to use include Google Analytics, Google Tag Manager. These are free tools. This is something that every website should have. These are really our most basic ways of measuring traffic with Google Analytics, but then enhanced tagging with Google Tag Manager will give us that more granular detail around where engagement is happening, where we see folks clicking. Again, they're classic tools, free to implement, lots of great tutorials online, so they're very approachable and easy for a marketing coordinator to put into place. Beyond that, we look at tools like Hotjar, which is like a heat mapping tool to understand where users are clicking, how far they're scrolling, things like that. That one requires a little bit more of an investment. And then if you are sort of looking for that next level, really granular type data, this is when we would start to look at something like user testing. If you wanted to run a user test on your existing website to understand how folks would like to behave on the site or engage, or where they think they should go versus where you're hoping they go. Right. Or something like a tool like Site Improve, which can scan your entire website and give you tons of great data around load time, different types of speeds on the as far as images, when images load, and layouts, and how your site is really functioning technically. Those are the ones that we would look at the most at varying levels of investment. Right. But I think, Lindsay, do you have some tools you like to use too?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with a lot of the ones that you talked about. We use those as well in the marketing world. I would also say SEO tools like Moz, Google Search Console is a really great one, or also SEO, but also more of like the technical, like site crawl side. And what our team likes to use those for is often at, how people are coming to your website, keywords they might be searching for, and where your website might be falling short, right? Because what we're trying to accomplish is trying to prove why a new website might be needed. So by looking in Google Search Console, you might be able to see, a lot of people are searching for, X, YZ type of keywords, but you're ranking really poorly for those. So there's a case right there of like why your website is falling short. Maybe there's some SEO issues with it. Or maybe you rank really well, but you're not getting many clicks for it. Maybe you are on the first page, but Google Search Console is telling you you're clicking for what that ranking is. I also really like Google's Looker Studio, which you call Data Studio, which I know we use kind of on an ongoing basis, as well as for marketing specific campaigns. Also another free tool, which was pretty good at offering some of these kind of free tools. And it's really easy. There's pre-built templates that building reports. You can create visualizations there. You can put a lot of different data sources, again, to kind of prove that case of needing a new site. I also love SpyFu. It's a good way of looking at your competitors. There also is a free component to that as well. And you can kind of look at market potential. And again, where is your website maybe falling short so that you're not able to compete very well in the market. But there's never like one single tool.
No.
But those are kind of the ones that are
Yeah, I think that's such a great point too, because I think what trips a lot of people up is they start to think like, well, I have to spend so much money and I have to get all these tools in order to tell a story. And the truth is you really don't. With a couple really well-chosen tools, some free, maybe some paid, or even just using free trials on some of them, you can get enough data to really start to make that case.
So when you look at platforms like Google Analytics, Google Search Console, Google Tag Manager, how easy are those to set up, especially if you work for, say, a bank and you're not sure if you have that set up already?
Yeah, I think, these tools have been around for a really long time. I always say, like, YouTube is your friend. You can learn pretty much anything from YouTube. There's a lot of great free resources out there that will help you institute Google Analytics onto your site, and then also help you with coming up with that Tag Manager setup. Tag Manager is a little bit more advanced. There can be a little bit of code understanding there, but still it's very approachable, and I think YouTube provides a lot of great resources.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say the setup of a lot of them, especially from a development perspective, can be, sometimes simple, sometimes a little bit more research is required. And then a lot of the tools too, like just they have some free components like Moz, for example, they have a domain analysis and all you have to do is enter in your website URL and it gives you some like free data. So there's a lot of those like that where maybe they do have some pricing components to it, but they also do have some free options where you could maybe gather some data initially and then, maybe say to your upper leadership, hey, this tool has been useful. I've been able to gather X, Y, and Z, and now I want to pay for it so that I can get more out of it.
So it sounds like they're relatively easy to set up, or some version of what you're looking for you can set up.
Yeah.
So the next step, I guess, would be you've set up the tools, you're collecting data. How do you start to be able to notice warning signs? And also, what are warning signs that would demonstrate that either you need a change in your marketing tactics or some kind of change on your website? And I guess I'll start with Christina, if there are any examples you've noticed.
Yeah, I think, from sort of a functionality perspective, I'll kind of take it from the functionality and you can kind of take it from maybe more of an SEO digital marketing perspective. But from a functionality perspective, the things that we would start to look at are there load issues? Are there layout issues? When a user lands on your site, is the site taking a long time to load? Are those different widgets on the page or areas of engagement not loading properly? Does it look weird, essentially?
Yeah.
That's kind of the most obvious, right? And that can be for a number of reasons. It can be design related. It can be that there's updates that, maybe your CMS is on an older platform and now there's been a few updates that haven't been made. Security issues is a big one. That's one that we always are very cognizant of, especially if you have a site that has a lot of plugins. Those plugins are by third parties. They're not always managed as best as they can be. So you can have a lot of security vulnerabilities there. And that's really, from the technical side, that's what I would say I would look out for the most. Sort of from that, what we can glean from analytics, looking at obvious drop-offs in traffic, obvious drop-offs in conversions, that's really pointing to, user frustration. So we really want to pinpoint where are those bits of user frustration and what does that journey look like so that we can see, okay, this is not working anymore. Are they, getting to our conversion element and not clicking on it because it's not loading well or something like that, or it's too below the fold and we can't move it for various reasons, whatever it might be. So looking for those obvious declines in page views and how they trend over time is very important. And then also looking at, easy ways to spot user frustration. Are they exiting from certain pages? Are they not fulfilling the journey? Perhaps you have a really high bounce rate, or, you see this one specific page has an incredibly high exit rate. Those are the real red flags that we would want to say, like, okay, something is happening here that really needs to be addressed.
Right. And so on the campaign side, what are some of the key indicators something has to change?
Yeah, and it's interesting you say about bounce rates because that's something I was going to bring up as well. If you are running marketing campaigns, something to keep in mind is it can be common to see high bounce rates, sometimes upwards of 80-85%, because if you think maybe you're driving a specific campaign promoting a certain product and they come to that single page and they might call and they become a lead, well, that could still be considered a bounce. So when looking at the campaign side of things, I would say if you're consistently seeing anything over 85% with bounce rate, especially if you're looking at universal analytics, where that metric still kind of exists, definitely, looking at that over time and how that compares to maybe like prior campaigns that you ran during that similar time period, just kind of looking at the data in a very like analytical way and not making quick decisions off of it. And then I would also say conversion rates based on your campaign. If maybe you ran the same campaign the prior year and you were seeing, really strong conversion rate, and now you're seeing something drastically different this year, and there's no increased market competition, there's no change really in keyword costs and things like that, there's no other indicators, then I would say it's safe to assume that there's some issues on the site. And also, if anyone's using Google Analytics 4 and you're not really sure how to analyze that bounce rate, because that's kind of an evolving metric with the new GA4 platform, engagement rate is something that you would want to look at in that case. So really low engagement rate, which is essentially the opposite of a bounce rate.
Right.
So those are the things that I would look at from a marketing perspective. But again, keeping in mind other factors as well within your marketing campaign, like that competition and things like that.
So it looks like you've found some glaring points. We've discussed some of the warning signs. So what are some incremental, maybe small steps you can take if you're not ready to totally redo your website, or if you don't have the budget, that you can start making some quick fixes now?
Yeah, I think, my biggest recommendation around some small tweaks or changes that you can make to improve the functionality of the website or the web experience as a whole really would revolve around content. Content hygiene is probably my number one tip. And what that really means is taking a look at the content on your site, identifying how does it work within the layout and the functionality of your site as it exists today. Are your CTAs within the right amount of characters for the widget that you're using on the page? Do your images fit really well within the parameters? Are they optimized for loading? Those are the kinds of things we'd want to take a look at. And then also looking at, that actual, what are the words on the page? Do they make sense? Do they speak to your audience? Do they resonate with your audience? And we really, at the end of the day, we want to optimize for robots, but write for people. And so we want to make sure that when users come to the site, they're finding something of value, they're spending time on the page, they're engaging, and then ultimately taking that conversion that we're hoping that they take. But at the same time, we have to drive traffic. So we are still looking at, is it optimized for SEO? Do we have good keyword structure? So really taking a look at that content piece is not only going to serve you in the short term for making your site function a lot better, but it's also going to serve you in the long term, because should you get that funding and that budget to be able to redo your website, you've already got your content piece locked in and done. And that is a huge, huge weight off your mind when you're rebuilding your site.
And to play off of that, in addition to content, also just like metadata is a really simple thing. Your meta title for your homepage can maybe set you apart from your competition. If your meta title is just your brand name, maybe you add something to it. And most CMSs, that's a pretty simple thing, and you can make that change. Another thing that you could consider doing is a single landing page. You could do that within maybe the structure of your existing website CMS, or you could use a tool like Unbounce. I love Unbounce. It's really friendly for even the non-designer. You can whip up a really nice pre-built template, customize it with your branding, kind of move stuff around, and drive a marketing campaign to it and gather data. So you're not holding off on your marketing or prospecting efforts and driving people, gathering leads, hopefully driving some revenue while you're still trying to prove that bigger point for the website. So another great tool that we kind of talked about tools earlier. Unbounce is another really good one.
And can you elaborate on metadata a little bit? What, when you're changing the title, what does that mean, and what does that look like for your possible users or consumers?
Sure. So the meta title is usually a simple thing within your CMS. Sometimes if it's just the homepage, it might just be like a master setting somewhere in your CMS. And from the user perspective, when they're searching for your brand and they're on that Google search results page, they see kind of all those different like articles or different pages. And usually it's like the blue link that you see at the top. And oftentimes, like I said, the default will be just your branded term. But what I'm seeing a lot in the industry nowadays is people will add like a colon or a dash to it and then say, top provider or something to that effect that makes you stand out above your competition. And again, it's a simple thing because it's really just your meta title within your CMS. You're not doing this massive restructure to your website.
Yeah, it's almost like a CTA in the meta title.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And it sounds like that fix would help people come to your website, and your fixes would help make sure they convert once they get to your website.
Yeah, they definitely go hand in hand.
So as you're getting ready to pitch this idea of a website redesign to your leadership, you're making these quick fixes, quick changes, you're looking for warning signs, but ultimately you're trying to use this data to tell a story. So how do you use the data to tell a story?
Yeah, that's a really great question. That's definitely something that a lot of folks struggle with, is like, we have all this data. What does it mean? How do I pull the insights out of it? How do I tell that story so that I can make sure that I'm being as effective as possible in what I'm trying to pitch to leadership or what I might be trying to get an investment or budget for? And I would say for that one, we'd really want to take it. The first step to that is really unifying that data, bringing them all your different data sources in to a single tool like Looker Studio, which Lindsay had mentioned earlier, or any tool that you like, and then really taking a look at following that customer journey. All the different data points that we bring in, we talk about so many different data points. You could get numbers for anything. But what are those most important numbers? Where do we see those users falling off? How can we follow each step? So we really want to put ourselves in the user's shoes and take a look at, where are people going? Where are they stumbling? And the data points are going to tell you that. When you see the numbers start to come down or you see very defined stopping points, that's your story. Your story is my user showed up. They didn't find what they were looking for. They didn't make it to my conversion element. And it's likely because this is not loading or this page is not optimized. And that's how you start to pull out and tell that story of all the different stumbling blocks that really justify why you may need a rebuild.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. And I would really focus on the metrics that you think that they would care about. And I would imagine for many organizations, that's leads and revenue.
Yep.
So, you could estimate for this X number of dollars, we could get X number of leads, approximately, of course. And those leads would lead to this amount in revenue about. So, really focusing on what is important to them and not getting too much into the weeds because, yeah, you can definitely have analysis paralysis with data. And you can get, you could have all sorts of reports through Looker Studio and things like that, but you really want to focus on what matters to them and what is going to be meaningful for the business and what data points can I bring to the table that's going to make that case.
Yeah, and that's such an interesting idea too, because I think when we talk about data, we often think about it in terms of like raw data, digital from the website, page views, speed, those real sort of hardcore metrics. And we don't really think about unifying it with the actual data in our organizations, things like revenue, connecting that back to if I need to get 10 leads to cause this many dollars in revenue and working that number backwards. So when we talk about unifying data, it's really about looking at the full data of all, your full ecosystem within your corporation or your company, your organization to understand, how can we connect all the dots so that way our digital presence is working in conjunction to serve our goals.
Yeah, exactly. And I would say a lot of people struggle with that with like SEO, for example, because there's not it's not like Google Analytics is going to spit out that revenue number for you, especially as it relates to something like organic SEO. But you could look at it from the perspective of, well, if I had paid for those people to come to my website through a paid ad, this is about how much I would pay, but I got them organically. So sometimes people will use a calculation that way. But like you said, sometimes you have to use a combination of different knowledge points and data points to make that case. And it's not going to be as clear as like a scorecard and a metric coming straight from Google Analytics, and it's going to give you the clear answer.
Right.
Absolutely. Moving on from this webinar, you've closed out the tab and it's time to get started. What are things that viewers can do today to get started on moving their website forward?
Yeah, I think, what really is the takeaway is, we always want all of our recommendations to be backed by data. Everybody wants to have a very strong case to be able to, justify why they want to invest in their site or in their presence digitally in general. So in terms of what can I do today, setting up analytics. If you don't already have analytics on your site, that's number one. Getting analytics set up, taking a look at, do you have the bandwidth to maybe institute that next level with Google Tag Manager? Do you have time to learn a little bit of it? Or maybe even just putting it on in a very basic way, but just kind of get used to it. And don't be afraid to play with it. I think a lot of people are nervous they're going to break something. And oftentimes you kind of won't. So it's okay. You can kind of enjoy it and see what you can measure and see, what the outcomes are. And it becomes very like encouraging to do so. I would also say setting up tracking on your site search. If you have a search functionality on your website, tracking those terms that users are inputting is huge. This is going to give you great data around, the desires of your audience, what they're looking for. It's going to give you great ideas for content, might give you great ideas for functionality. So that's another one that I really highly recommend. And then finally, really, again, unifying that data. There's nothing more depressing than data in silos. It's just totally useless to us. We don't want that. We want to have one big picture where we can tell the story. We can see what's happening. We can really understand how people are moving through our website and where they're, getting hung up so that we can help fix it and really start to build that compelling case of why we need a budget for a new one.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I would say a good place to start from a marketing perspective is just start by running a campaign. Now, when I say campaign, that can mean a lot of things and even sound very daunting, but it really could be something as simple as doing a couple promoted posts on social media like LinkedIn or Facebook, just getting your brand out there, because if you think, your SEOs may already be struggling, you're not getting those clicks like we talked about earlier, you see that in Google Search Console, your website's not very SEO optimized maybe, but at least maybe you could get in front of some people, get some prospective leads, generated to your site through an ad perspective. And it often doesn't even mean that much of an investment. You could do a couple $100s for a couple promoted posts. Maybe it's blog content that you have already on your site. And that just allows you to get some visibility for your brand. Again, not hold off on your marketing entirely, and also gather more of that data. Because if your website is struggling to generate traffic to it because its SEO is poor, well, then you might not have enough data to prove your point that you need a new website. Right. So having that ad campaign and getting traffic to your site and paying for it on even a small scale could be really beneficial.
Mm-hmm. And when you talk about ad campaigns, that could be a variety of campaigns on different platforms, right? With different goals. Ultimately, the goal is to increase traffic, but...
Yeah, I mean, you could really start with anything. And at Silvertech, we use the crawl, walk, run approach. And same goes for this marketing campaign idea. You don't have to do Google search, although that's certainly an option, or a Google display. But again, you could just do something promoted on a social media platform. And that's often very easy to do. You don't need to set up a whole ad account necessarily on Facebook. You could boost it and do a little bit of targeting, customized that way. So you can really start small, gather some data, maybe learn how those channels operate with your website, and then start to walk and run from there.
Thank you. And thank you both for your insight and your time. I have a couple just fun questions of things I wanted to pick your brain about. And the first is just industry trends. What are some industry trends that you've been hearing about, you're excited about, some that you might think are hokey, like anything that you have heard lately about the outlook of digital marketing or digital strategy?
I would say there's a few things for me. One kind of geeky thing, I guess, is just like the future of analytics and Google Analytics in particular. Google Analytics 4 has been out for a while. I'm sure many of you have heard of it. And people are starting to implement it and everything, but they haven't quite sunsetted Universal yet. So it'll be really interesting to see in this coming year how that transforms, because Google Analytics 4 has a lot of really interesting capabilities, but it's not totally refined yet. There's still some kind of wonky things with it. It doesn't integrate with some reporting tools. It's still a work in progress, but I'm really excited for its potential and to kind of see where that's going to go. But I'm also really excited about like different ad platforms that are coming out. Digital radio is becoming a really big thing and becoming very impactful. You'd be surprised how many people actually click on like a Spotify ad. And same with Pandora or like iHeart. There's a lot of potential out there. And then even with some of like the scrappier social media platforms like Reddit or community forums, you can run ads through there. So that'll be interesting to see how that transpires in the coming years.
Yeah. I think for me, some of the things that I'm most excited about are personalization, and that next level of personalization. Hyper personalization has become a big thing where we're really looking for one-to-one conversations, you know,
like on your
where
website.
Yeah, where we used to, you know, say like, oh, we're going to personalize for an audience. Now we're really looking at, okay, we're going to personalize for a specific person in that audience. And I think that that's really exciting because I think, you know, the data has shown that users are happy to give you their information if they feel like you're going to give them something of value. And I think that's really interesting because it becomes that conversation of what can we give them of value? What do they value? And that's the kind of stuff that I get really excited about. And then beyond that, I think it's really exciting seeing what's available now through different CMSs like Kentco and Sitefinity in terms of the marketing automation that they have built into the CMS. Oftentimes we have clients or folks will come to me and say like, well, we really, you know, we want to get a CRM, but it's such a big investment and we're just not really sure. And my recommendation is always, if you have a marketing automation functionality out of your CMS, use it as a test drive, you know, find out, is this going to work for us? Can we do this? Can we do the strategy behind it? Can we implement it? Can we make some waves in terms of revenue? And then that becomes a much, you know, easier conversation to have. Or you may find that CMS is providing everything you need. And so that's the kind of stuff that I get really excited about because I love the data and I love to see tools be used to their fullest extent.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of tools we've been using are growing to allow users to do more with them.
Definitely.
Which is very exciting. Yeah. So what do you do if you are really stumped and maybe you don't have the ability to set up some of this tracking, or you're not really sure where to start? What's a good thing to do?
Yeah, I think that's a really good one. I think, you know, oftentimes it can be very daunting. It feels very technical. We don't always have, you know, technical support on our teams, web support on our teams. And that's really when you want to reach out to an agency and really start to understand, you know, I need help with this. We can't, as marketers, we are on the hook for so much. We are expected to know a little bit of everything. And unfortunately, we cannot specialize in everything. And that's when having a partner can really make all the difference. You know, let somebody else bring their expertise to the table and take care of that for you so you can focus on the things of, you know, the aspects of your role that you're really concerned about, that overall visioning, the overall strategy, or whatever pieces of your role really work for you. So that's when you would want to reach out to an agency, and you can do something as simple as engaging for, you know, just an audit, and really just get an audit moving and understand, you know, what are my issues? Can you institute these tools for me so I can have this tracking? Lean on a partner for that, because that can just make your life so much easier.
So I want to thank Christina and Lindsay both for their insight and for taking the time here to meet with us today. I think it was a really helpful session. Well, if you have any other questions or you wanted to pick Lindsay or Christina's brain anymore, you can reach us at silvertech.com.